Hello everyone, my name is Nick Infernus and welcome back to another list video. Normally around this time I would be doing a big list video ranking every figure from whatever chapter of Transformers Legacy we're in at the time, in this case Legacy United. However, this year I wanted to take a different approach. You might also notice that I haven't done my Wave 12 video yet, but honestly, when 5 of the 8 of the figures in that wave are nothing really new to talk about, it's hard for me to find the motivation to make a video like that. Plus, all the takes I have done have been unsuccessful, where I can't even get past the intro or the first couple spots. So, instead, we will rank all the figures and talk about Wave 12 with a tier list, because why not? Also, excuse the ad down here. There's nothing I can do about that. There's no way to X out of it or anything like that, so we're just going to have to deal with the ad at the bottom. So what I have here is a tier list ranging from, I thought I got rid of that, whatever, ranging from Combiner Wars all the way to Legacy United, the latter of which is all we're going to be focusing on. So yes, do not worry about the rest of this. If you want to do something with this tier list, I will put the link in the description, but we're just going to focus on Legacy United. Now, I do have an honorable mentions tier down here. I'm actually going to move this up a notch. Yeah, we do have the honorable mentions tier, which is just figures that, probably could go on the list, but, they were reissues that came out previously, so they don't qualify for the list. Also, Lockdown is here because for some reason they waited until him to fix the elbows on the scrap hook mold. I don't know what took it so long, but I'm glad they did it on a character that people actually care about. So that's why he's here, because at the very least I want to shout him out, because I don't really know where I would have done it otherwise. Okay, so how we have it working here is that normally I'd have like S be fantastic, A be great, B be good, C be okay, and D be not good. That's how it would work for the other chapters. I think for this though, I'll have S be like top of the line, absolutely the best figures. A is excellent, but a couple problems. B is great, C is good, D is okay. And then I'd have F if there were any figures from here that I actually didn't like. I mean, I guess for the hell of it, we could throw like Strong Arm in F tier, but I'm not gonna. She can just stay in the honorable mentions. So yeah, we have it here. Wave 1, Wave 2, Wave 3, Wave 4, and Wave 5, along with Wheeljack, Magmatron, and Tidal Wave. So, without wasting any more time than I already am, let's get into it. So first up, we have Boulder Crash. Boulder Crash was our introduction to the Infernac universe with the Rock Lords. And I'd say with this one, he's a C tier. He's a pretty good figure, pretty neat design, still has that giant stick running down his back, which looks a little awkward and can get in the way of posing and also in the way of transformation. But, aside from that, there's nothing that's like really big wrong with him, I guess, aside from his posability being limited for the most part. Transformation's also a little clunky, but it can be fun. And the trike mode does look pretty nice. He's like low C tier. I think when we get the rest of the figures in here, you'll see that he's kind of low C tier. And by the way, I will be placing these. I have a Google Doc open on my phone with my ranking of all these guys, so you will see them from worst to best in the different tiers. It'll just be best in the front, worst in the back. Moving on from that, we have Core Class Energon Megatron. And in a way, this was kind of Hasbro's way of dipping their toes into the Energon universe, seeing if people would actually, want figures of those guys. And for the most part, reception has been pretty good with this figure and the Galvatron repaint in particular. Well, really both of them, not really one in particular. For me, I'm gonna throw him in A tier. His posing in the posing in the shoulders is not the best, and he's fairly simple for what he is, but he's still a really fun figure that's very faithful to the character in both of his modes. So I think A tier is pretty fair. Next, we have Tasmania Kid. You'll notice that I'm kind of going from core class upwards for this, just, for the hell of it. Tasmania Kid, I went back and forth between who I liked more between him and Energon Megatron. I think it's mostly my connection to Tasmania Kid that's gonna, you know, that kind of convinced me to, I guess I'm drawn more into him than I am to Megatron, so I'll throw him an A tier above Megatron since, in general, I like the overall design of him a lot more. I think the Tasmanian Devil alt mode is very cute. It doesn't really pose better than Megatron, but I'd say that everything else he does better than Megatron, especially because with the backpack here, it feels more like an older Beast Wars toy. So, very nostalgic for people who grew up with the Beast Wars timeline. So, yeah, solid A tier for Tasmania Kid. So then we have animated Bumblebee, and this is one that grew on me a little bit over time. I still think that the shoulder assembly is a bit strange with the way the arms are positioned, and the transformation is a little clunky, but it's pretty good once you get the hang of it. He still poses really well, and he's a very faithful, you know, adaptation in both robot mode and alt mode, especially in alt mode. And even in robot mode, even with the stylizations, I still think that he pulls it off better than a lot of the prime designs. So I'll give him B tier. He's great, but the shoulder assembly and transformation do keep him from being an excellent figure, at least for me. So then we have Chase. I remember someone saying in my Wave 8 video that Chase probably should have been higher. And, maybe I would have been okay with putting him higher, but there's a lot that's holding him back. So I'm going to throw him in C tier. Like it's a nice robot mode and a really good car mode. Posing's pretty weak since he just pulls 90 degrees with the elbows and knees, and the shoulders are probably one of the worst cases of hot rod shoulders we've gotten recently. And the transformation, especially with the back panels, is a bit of a pain. So he's not a bad figure, but he's not really a great one. He's just kind of lower end of good. All right, Magnius, our other introduction to the Infernac universe. And this guy I'm going to put in B tier above Bumblebee. He poses better than Bumblebee, and he has a better transformation than Bumblebee. The robot mode and vehicle mode are completely new creations from Wholecloth, so there's not really a lot to judge there, but I do really like the design of it. Honestly, when it comes to all three versions of this mold that are out between this, Nucleus, and Calcitron, I think they all look really good. This one's probably my least favorite, but it's still a really cool rock robot, and the alt mode on it does kind of give the Flintstone vibes that I want to say they were going for, but most likely not. Yeah, it's another great one. It's just, some of the joints are a little tight, and there's not really a character here to be attached to. It's just, do you like the way it looks? Then buy it. Simple as that. Then we have Windblade, and I know this might contradict my Wave 8 video, but she's going in D tier. I wish I could have her higher, but over time, she did start to wear on me. Like, I've got nothing against the robot mode except for maybe the backpack, but even then, the backpack's not the worst thing ever. From what I've heard, it's pretty much par for the course with Windblade figures, so it's to be expected. At the same time, though, like, it is still a pretty big backpack. But outside of that, she doesn't really pose great. Transformation's pretty boring, and the jet mode is pretty compromised. Like, chunky nose cone aside, the fact that the arms are just hanging along the sides, it still feels. I feel like you could have at least done something more with that than just have them lay along the sides of the jet mode. So yeah, she's not really that great, or at least as great as I originally gave her credit for. I'm still happy to have her and Slipstream, who we will get to later. But I'd be lying if I said that, I'd be lying if I said that I liked her as much as I thought I did initially. So moving from one of the lower end, we actually move up to probably one of the best figures in this chapter of Legacy with animated Optimus Prime. And just cutting to the chase here, I'm going to throw him all the way up in S tier because this is probably one of the most faithful, stylizations that we've gotten in all of Legacy in both modes. Even if it is stylized, you can still tell like just from looking at him in either mode, that this is supposed to be animated Optimus Prime. And even outside that, it poses fantastically and has a pretty fun transformation. I wouldn't just say that this is one of the best figures in Legacy United. This is probably one of the best figures in Legacy as a whole. Like top 5, excluding retools and reissues. So moving from one Great Voyager to another, we have Thundertron. Thundertron is a figure that isn't doing anything too special, but everything it's doing, I'd say it's doing pretty great. So I'm going to throw him into A tier with the 2 core boys. As far as a robot mode goes, it's pretty accurate to his original toy, even though there are some changes. The front tiger legs are now hiding inside the shoulder pads as opposed to being the shoulder pads, and it has a different head for whatever reason. I will say I do like the Star Raider version of this more, with the more toy accurate head with the eye patch and the hook, and in general the brighter, nicer colors. But oh, can I hide this? Oh, thank you. Sorry about that little interruption there. Yeah, I do like the Star Raider version of this more, but the standard version is still pretty nice. And in general, I think he has a really cool design. The posing is really good. Transformation is kind of just the standard, cat mode transformation, with one exception, that being the front legs. The way they fold out of the shoulder pads is really satisfying, and it's a step that I love doing every time. And then the Tiger mode looks pretty nice, and once again, faithful to how that original toy looked. Really, the toy's all we have to go off of here because, he didn't really show up in any actual, animated media, so yeah, that's really all we're going off of here, but I'd say that's enough to really give him a high spot. So moving on to the leader of this wave, not counting Laser Prime here, we have Tigerhawk. Tigerhawk, I'm going to put in A tier. I want to put him in S tier, but I think his posing and transformation, they're good. They're just not the best that, he could have. It's just not the best that he could have had. I feel like there are some instances where he could have posed better and probably should have. And the transformation is very chaotic when you first do it, but it's not bad. You got to get used to it. Honestly, what puts him in A tier is just the fact that he looks fantastic in both of his modes. He was pretty much the first Legacy leader I was excited for in a long time, since Dreadwing I was a little disappointed with Skyquake, so Dreadwing's excitement was dampened quite a bit. And I still don't know what was going on with my reaction to Armada Megatron. I love him, but for some reason he just wasn't clicking with me initially. So when I saw Tigerhawk, I got really excited, and that excitement paid off because he's really excellent. So we have our first sort of non-traditional figure in here with Origin Wheeljack. Origin Wheeljack is going to go in A tier, right in the middle of A tier. He's a little clunky. I won't deny that. But that's, like with both Bumblebee and Jazz, it's mostly because, well, he's pretty much trying to replicate a design that was impossible. An Earth robot mode with a space vehicle mode. Yeah, obviously that's not going to work in a toy without compromises, but he pulls it off better than Jazz, not as good as Bumblebee, but yeah, that's how I'd say he is. He's a lot better than Jazz, but just a little bit not as good as Bumblebee, but he's still great for what he is. Robot mode is still really faithful despite all the kibble. Posing's really good, again, despite all the kibble. Transformation's a lot of fun, where he basically turns into this big old box, and said big old box is a really nice big old box. So yeah, I'm not trying to repeat myself here, but I will say, of the Origin figures, he's right in the middle. Granted, that middle is a lot closer to the best one than it is the worst one. So moving into Wave 2, we have Beast Machine's Cheetor, who is going to go right in D tier. Not because it's a figure of Beast Machine's Cheetor. I think it does a really good job, capturing that design. It's just because it's just the overall look of him. It's just the plastic they cast him in makes him look really, really cheap. Like, he looks like a McDonald's toy in the worst way. Still very accurate, but casting him in a better plastic probably could have gotten him at the very least in C tier. Outside of that, posing is fine. You're not really going to get a lot out of the legs because they're the triple jointed thing. He does have, kind of something of an ab crunch, if I'm remembering correctly. It's been a while since I've handled the figure, so I could definitely be wrong about that since, he went in storage. Transformation's fine, but it's very simple and also very frustrating to get certain things tabbed in. And the cheetah mode would be fine if the fists weren't just sticking up from out of the front legs. Yeah, his front legs are a bit of an eyesore, is what I'm trying to say. So yeah, another one that was a little disappointing, but not bad. I guess if you want a figure of Beast Machine's Cheetor to go with Thrilling 30 Tankor, then by all means you have an option. So, like with Windblade, we're going from a low point to a higher point with Chromia. And Chromia, I'm going to put in A tier. Yes, right up here in A tier below Wheeljack. So she's a repaint of the Legacy Evolution animated Prowl that came out back in 2023. And I think it works very well as a version of Chromia in general. As Cyberverse Chromia, it doesn't work at all. But if you take it as Chromia, like I have been, then it's a very good mold for that character, and it fits a female body pretty well. Transformation's still not the most fun experience, but it's not bad. And in general, it's just a great repaint of an already great figure. Excuse me. So next we have Gears, who is going to be another S tier figure. Yeah, I never thought I'd say that about a figure of Gears, but here we are. One of the more unlikable Autobots, and yet he gets one of the best figures in the whole line. What can I say? He looks great in both modes, poses fantastically, and has a fun, simple transformation. Honestly, along with 86 Grimlock and Siege Sideswipe, this might be another, example of this might be another all-time great example of a simple but fun transformation. I mean, he does end up with a bit of a backpack, but it's really not a big deal. It is just kind of the case of him hauling around the entire front of the alt mode on his back, but to be fair, it wasn't exactly clear in the animation model where that was supposed to go, so I'll give it a pass. Last deluxe of Wave 2, we have Shard. Shard I am going to put in B tier. She'll be the lowest one in B tier right now. I almost said he. I forgot this is supposed to be a woman. So one thing I will note with her is that with both her and the Boulder Crash mold, I haven't handled that mold in a very long time, so my thoughts are going to be a little bit rusty. I do remember her being mostly great, though. I'm still not a fan of the back helicopter rotor just, sticking off her back, since, it does stick very far out, and you can't really put it down because it's longer than she is tall. Aside from that, she still poses really good. She, has an ab crunch and some mobile feet. I guess that does make up a good amount for her lack of elbows and knee bend, for her lack of good elbows and knees, since they just bend 90 degrees each. Transformation is mostly pretty fun outside of the sort of squishiness of some of it. And in general, I do like the overall look of her robot mode and helicopter modes. Interesting that they went with a helicopter, but it's a nice looking helicopter, and it has rotors that spin very nicely. So yeah, not the best of the rock characters, but still a great figure overall. So next we have Silverbolt. Silverbolt is a figure I was waiting for a long time. Very hyped to get him, and he still managed to surprise me with his transformation. That being said, he is going to go in A tier as opposed to S tier. I still love him. I still think he's great. This is a case where I was happy to see the realistic Beast head because of how much I hate the look of his head in the actual Beast Wars show. That's the only case where I think where I'm happy they went with the Beast head, because like the real life Beast head. Because I think all the other ones I would have been perfectly fine if they went with the show head, because the show heads look fine. Not on him. The rest can have their show heads, but please give him the realistic wolf head. And aside from that, he still poses really well and has a fun transformation where the step with the backpack managed to, catch me off guard and actually surprise me. Yeah, it's a very fun transformation and a very fun figure that's still pretty accurate in both modes. it's just, I guess what's really holding him back is just, I guess just the fact that, you know, with how they were still doing the realistic beast modes in, this far into Legacy, when they already showed with, Dragon, Megatron, and Tigerhawk that they could do show accuracy. I'm kind of split on, the whole realistic beast aspect. But yeah, that, and, he poses well, but it's not the best posing ever, so I guess that is something that drags him down a little bit. He's still a fantastic figure, but I'm really only comfortable putting him in A tier. Then we have Cybertron Starscream, who's another S tier. I think he's probably one of the best figures of any Starscream we've gotten in some time. Really, I think he's the best one we've gotten since the Siege Starscream. I still think Siege Starscream is better than this, but this is still a fantastic figure for what it is. It's very faithful recreation of the Cybertron design for Starscream, which already I think is one of his coolest ones, especially with the giant null ray pauldrons. Very neat design choice. I guess if I did have one problem with them, it is that the back fins in robot mode stick out a little bit too much, but that's a very small issue. That and a good amount of his joints are loose, but he's still able to hold a pose where it matters. Transformation is pretty fun, if a little fiddly at times, and the jet mode is a very nice jet mode. I don't remember if also he poses really great. That's kind of something to expect with a lot of the S tier figures, is that they are some of the better posing figures in this chapter of the line, and really just in Legacy in general. I don't think there's a single S tier figure that would pose averagely. And then lastly for Wave 2, we have Sandstorm, who was another case of kind of a Voyager-sized character getting put into leader class because it is a triple changer, so there's going to be a lot of complexity here. And this is probably one of the more complex triple changers that they've done, since this thing has to turn into a robot, a helicopter, and a dune buggy. And I think that he pulls all three of those modes off really well, alongside having above average posability and some fun, if complex, transformations. So I'm going to put him in B tier. What's keeping him out of, A tier or even S tier, it's mostly just the peg connection with his chest. It's very weak and it comes untabbed very often. A lot more often than I would prefer. So for that, and for the fact that some of his joints are tighter than I'd like, I'm going to leave him in B tier. But don't get me wrong, I still love him. I still think he's a great figure, and I would still recommend him if you're interested in a G1 triple changing Sandstorm. Now, before I move on, excuse me while I take a drink of water. Thank you. I've been talking for at least 20 minutes. Probably needed that. So now we move on to the big ticket items, which release between waves 2 and 3. Starting with Magmatron, excuse me, a little slip of the tongue. Starting with Magmatron, he's an excellent figure, but I'm only going to put him in A tier. Really what's keeping him out of S tier is just the fact that, his posing is a little bit limited by all the kibble, and the transformation for the Giganotosaurus can be, can be a pain, especially with the hilt of the sword in robot mode. Aside from that, they absolutely nailed this guy's design in figure form. I guess that's not surprising, considering that that's a pretty consistent quality of Commander class figures. For the most part, they are as accurate as they can be to their show counterparts. Excuse me. And in general, I think the 3 dino modes look excellent. The Giga is probably my least favorite just because it feels the most like a static dinosaur toy, since there's not really a lot of good posing options. The Quetzalcoatlus would be my second favorite, since it is pretty nice, and at the very least it has more options than something like 86 Swoop does. And then my favorite is the Elasmosaur, mostly for its neck, but also just because it's a very nice they're all very nice dino toys, but the Elasmosaurus has the most it's not an Elasmosaurus, I forget the name of it, but the long neck sea dino is the most fun to play with because of the neck posability, and also it's just fun to twiddle the fins back and forth. And even without all the kibble getting in the way, he still poses really well for a commander, or really just for a figure of his size. Deep elbows, deep knees, really mobile feet. Really, the only problem with posing is just the limited head articulation, but there's ways to work around it. So then, after him, we get to a figure that I have waited for so long to talk about, Tidal Wave. This is a figure that I originally wasn't going to talk about because I said I was done buying Titans, but after seeing him at my local comic shop, I figured I'd get him for myself as an early birthday present. And you know what? I'm going to throw him in S tier. Yeah, a Titan that I'm actually willing to throw in S tier. My history with Titans has been interesting. There was the arc, which was good but not fun to handle, and that I ended up selling off, and then only getting like 60% of the profit from. Thanks for that, eBay. And then Cybertron Metroplex, which I still have. It's a bit frustrating to move all the joints because of how tight the ratchets are, but he's still great for what he is. Tidal Wave, though, is excellent. First of all, the robot mode, for the most part, looks like it jumped off the screen. The posing is actually really good for a Titan, where he has above average arms and pretty average legs. I think he has a waist. Again, I haven't picked him up in a while, and I barely move the waist as is, but even if he didn't, this would still pose excellently. Transformation is really fun, despite this being something of a parts former. The transformation for all three of his alt modes is pretty fun to do. The Dark Fleet is a really awesome set of giant ships, even if the landing craft hates holding together. Yes, unfortunately, my copy has that problem too. It's not a big deal as long as you're careful with it. The combination into the giant battleship is pretty fun, and said giant battleship is the coolest thing that this does. He also has a base mode. Moving on. Fantastic Titan. If you have $200 that you want to spend on really any Transformers figures, I don't think you can go wrong with him, though keep in mind it is a pretty only do it if you are willing to. But if you are willing to, you're in for an awesome Titan. So moving into by far the smallest wave of any legacy wave, Strong Arm is disqualified, so we're not talking about her. She'd end up at the bottom of D tier anyways. First off, starting off this wave, we have Sideburn. Sideburn is probably I'm just now noticing we don't even have that many figures in the C tier. So let's change that and throw him in there. This is a repaint of the Legacy Shadow Striker. The Legacy Evolution Shadow Striker. And honestly, it fits him a lot more. He still has the same average posing that Shadow Striker did, and the same good but not necessarily great transformation that Shadow Striker had. And I would say that he does lose a point in alt mode for it being less accurate. Granted, I did read that Hasbro doesn't have the Dodge Viper license, so I can kind of get behind it, but at the same time, it is a pretty strange looking alt mode. Worked a little bit better for Shadow Striker since it did look a bit like something that you would see in Cyberverse. But especially if she was going to get repainted into Sideburn, I would have liked to see something, more along the lines of a Dodge Viper, kind of like a Studio Series Dino case. But the robot mode is where this guy truly shines. Yeah, that's Sideburn. I know he didn't have the coattails in the show, but I do like the look of the coattails, and in general, I do like the look of the robot mode overall. I think it definitely works a lot better in these colors. Really, it's just the posing and transformation being average that keeps them from going any higher. That and the alt mode not really being great. After that, we have Cybertron Hotshot, and this is another one that soured on me over time. He's not bad. I don't dislike him. In fact, I'm going to throw him in C tier right now, but he's going to be at the bottom of C tier. Over time, I really started to notice just how off the proportions were, especially in the arms. This guy's got some really long noodle arms when really I think I remember looking at a show model and him appearing more, buff than he actually is. So for him to have these long noodles as arms and then to have these really skinny not biceps, to him have these really stubby biceps and forearms, it just looks off to my eye. And in general, it looks weirder than the, Armada Hotshot did. Posing was never really great on this, so he's not really doing great in that regard. Plus, there's the fact that the the toe joint always wants to pop up, so he's guaranteed to fall over at least once or twice. Transformation is still fairly decent, and the alt mode is great. It's definitely his strong suit. So yeah, I can see why I loved this initially, but over time he has soured on me a good amount. What hasn't soured on me is Nucleus. I'm still going to throw him in B tier between Nucleus and Bumblebee. He's still great. He's still a great repaint. I love the pearlescent, almost silver that he has on some of his parts. But in general, the tolerances being tighter on this on a mold where they were already pretty tight, it made for a less enjoyable experience than, Magnius. And the fact that the roof would, pop up sometimes because of the little jet thrusters that he has on the back of his alt mode, it is a little annoying. In general, it is a great repaint of an already great figure, so it shouldn't be any surprise that he's in the same tier. And then we have Legacy Vector Prime, who is a repaint and slight retool of Legacy G-Axis, which I already love, so I think it should be obvious that this guy is going to go right up there in S tier with the rest of them. Now, of course, his QC still isn't the greatest. Thankfully, my copy doesn't have the issue where the head just falls in half for no reason. But other than that, a lot of the joints are still pretty loose, and it's not the most faithful recreation of the Cybertron show model. But honestly, if I'm being honest, there are aspects of this that I do like more than the Cybertron design. Like the fact that the nose cone actually, if you can even call it nose cone, actually becomes the chest instead of just folding up on his back. So it's kind of doing a reverse Earthrise Starscream, if you will. It still has the same great posing that G-Axis does, with more clearances in his shoulders. So that's, a bit of an improvement in posing over G-Axis. Same great transformation, and the alt mode actually works here, unlike G-Axis, where you kind of have to give it a pass for being an impossible design. So yeah, overall improvement over G-Axis, but I can see why some people, wouldn't like him, mostly just for it being a retool, not its own mold, and the QC still holding it back. All right, now for Wave 4, the first wave in all of Legacy where I did not buy everything new. Starting with Geocron, yet a lot of these entries are going to be shorter, so we're just going to throw him in C tier below Boulder Crash. It's pretty much the same thing, just with a less interesting color scheme and a really, really stupid head. So, everything's pretty much the same outside of the colors in the head, so not much else to go over there. Energon Galvatron is going to go in A tier above Megatron, if it'll cooperate. Thank you. Yeah, I do like the colors here more. Otherwise, there's not really a lot to go over. G1 Optimus Prime. This is a good figure, but there are some things that are holding it back. In what this is trying to be is a more modern take on that original G1 toy. And I think when it comes to the individual look of the modes, it nails it. It's perfect. It nails the look of the toy, if the original toy in both modes, but the posing being average and the transformation being just really annoying in some parts, that's the reason why I'm putting this in C tier. It's in C tier above the Boulder Crash mold, so it's still in a pretty decent spot, but it's mostly the transformation that puts it here. If it had a good transformation, it would probably still end up in B tier because of its average posing, not really having wrists or the clearest waist swivel. But I'd understand why it would have that. I'd be a little bit more forgiving of it considering what it's trying to do. But the transformation having a lot of squishiness and having 3 different sets of tabs in the truck bed when only one of them works, it doesn't make for the most fun experience. Plus, the fact that the guns barely fit in the hands does not help. So yeah, high C tier for him. Another high C tier figure will be Quake. Quake will go right above Optimus. So as a retool of Skullgrin, I think it pulls it off really well. Unfortunately, a lot of the joints are looser than they were on Skullgrin, so that does dampen the experience a lot more. I still can't help but appreciate all the retooling that they did for this to turn this, into Quake, Target Masters are still just kind of eh. Posing is pretty much the same as Skullgrin, so, pretty above average. Transformation is mostly fine outside of, the knees popping off. So, pretty frustrating there, but otherwise it's a fairly okay conversion. And the tank mode is pretty rough, but at the very least it's, more of a tank than Skullgrin was, so I am willing to put this above Skullgrin in several spots. So yeah, still not great, but it's good enough to where I'm okay with giving it high C tier. And then we move on to Slipstream, who I'm going to put in D tier below Windblade. It's like it has all the same problems that Windblade has, but now it also has the additional problem of having null rays that you can't properly mount. The best that you can do with these is just put them in the peg underneath the forearm. And, it's kind of a suboptimal option, but it is an option nonetheless. And in general, I think the color layout of this does lead to a less cohesive jet mode in terms of colors. But, it's still a fine figure, and I'm still happy to have it solely for the fact that, it's a character that I do have a bit of a connection to, like with Windblade. So yeah, kind of just an okay mold overall, but I am happy to have both versions of it. Now, a figure that I didn't think I would be buying, but I'm very happy I did, is Metalhawk, the Toy Colors version. This would have ended up in the honorable mentions, but I did decide to buy it. And in general, I think it's a little bit better than the original Metalhawk. Now, it's still going to go in, C tier right there. Actually, yeah, I think this is fine. Yeah, I'm still going to put it in C tier since it still has pretty average posing and a kind of a bastardization of what was already one of the, best transformations in recent memory, with that being the Kingdom Cyclonus transformation. But I do think that the new colors helps out a lot. Plus, the joints are tighter on this than they were on the Legacy Evolution Metalhawk, so it's not as much of a frustration to handle as that one was. That and the colors do actually lead to a more, cohesive jet mode, even if the jet mode still isn't really all that good. So yeah, high C tier for him. Very nice figure. Very nice upgrade to the original Legacy Evolution Metalhawk, but, not something that I'm saying you should go out and buy, especially if, the colors were like the last reason that you didn't like it. So then we have Animated Motormaster, and he's going to go right below Animated Optimus Prime. Really what's putting him below Animated Optimus is just the fact that, he's not really a character that exists outside of art. A very easy repaint, but a very nice looking one. Black and purple, usually a pretty nice color scheme. I really do like the purple axe. That's a very, nice color of clear plastic. And I do like the head on this. And of course, it's the Animated Optimus Prime mold, so, transformation and posing are still great. Really, it's just the Animated Optimus in black, so of course it's going to end up in the same tier. So then we have Armada Galvatron, and I'm going to put him in A tier, like I would have with, Armada Megatron if this was for the whole line. So he still has the shoulder problem that Armada Megatron had, but, outside of that, this is still a fantastic figure. Pretty good posing outside of the shoulders. Really fun, simple transformation. And the tank mode is really awesome. It's probably still my favorite tank mode out of all the tanks I have. And robot mode, it still nails the overall design very well. That and this does have a very, very, very slight edge against Armada Megatron for actually having the horns be glued in as opposed to, them being very easily removable. This wasn't one of the figures that I bought, but, his box was an open-faced one, so I was able to, go in and actually, mess with the head a little bit, and I can confirm that the horns are glued in. So, if that was a big problem you had with Megatron, then, suffice it to say, you'll be pretty happy with Galvatron. So then we have Soundwave, who I did buy, mostly because I wanted a tape recorder Soundwave, but if the leaked listings for Studio Series 86, or just Studio Series for 2026 in general, are anything to go by, we are going to get a new leader class version of this character that will hopefully be a new mold. I'm hoping it'll be like, and like a downscale, like a modified downscaled retool of the masterpiece. But for what this is, it's fine. Like middle of the road C tier. Robot mode looks nice, even if the overall proportions are a little strange, with the chest being a bit too wide. It still poses great, arguably better than the Siege. I'd say that the Siege and this are about equal, since, for the most part, they still have, 90 knees, deep elbows. This sacrifices the ab crunch but gains backward butterflies, so really, it's a case of which joint do you prefer. But after that, it falls apart. Transformation is dead simple, and even still manages to be frustrating with the way the feet fold into the shins and just the overall stiffness of it. And then the tape recorder mode is barely trying. Like, it looks good. It looks decent enough from the front, but from all other angles, it falls apart. So yeah, if I may give a hot take, this is probably one of the most, overhyped figures of the 2020s. And I'm happy that it got a re-release for the people who wanted it, but honestly, I'd rather have the Siege version as my main Soundwave than this. Still good, but, not as great as people say it is. And then we get to Wave 5, the one that I didn't do a ranking video on. And that's because only 3 of these, like half of the figures here, I actually have, extended thoughts on. That being said, so with that all being said, let's just, get into this little somewhat ranking, I guess. So G2 Breakdown is automatically going to go in the bottom of D tier because, it's the Legacy Wild Rider mold. I will say this probably has my favorite colors of this mold, and I do like the look of this more than Breakdown, but, it's still the inferior Breakdown retool of the Wild Rider mold with the parts forming spoiler. And outside of that, this still just has all the problems that Wild Rider had. Same wonky proportions, same dead average posing, same clunky transformation, but it does still have the same great alt mode, so it still has that going for it. Yeah, I'm not really interested in the G2 Stunticons, so I haven't gotten any of these, but, if you like the colors, then it's, not really a bad purchase. So now we get to talk about Origin Bumblebee for the first time ever on my channel, which feels like a bit of a crime because this thing is fantastic. In fact, I'm going to do something that you might not expect. I'm going to throw him in S tier. Excuse the ad up there. Yes, this is, I think, a good enough figure to go with the best of the best. This is probably the best Minibot mold we've gotten, and it's, like, on premise alone, it is a figure that is compromised by what it's trying to be. Obviously, the robot mode, like with Wheeljack, was going to be compromised because, Earth robot mode with space vehicle mode. But I'd say this pulls it off the best of the 3 of them. The robot mode is still very accurate despite all the kibble, and the alt mode is probably the most accurate of all 3 of them. I'd say probably tied with Wheeljack, but at the same time, he's the most accurate of them. Wheeljack does have some wrong details, whereas this doesn't have any wrong details in the alt mode. The alt mode is flawless on them. Transformation is still really fun, despite the fact that it's something of a shell former, but it's a really fun shell former. But I'd say this guy's biggest strength is the posing. This is one of the best posing deluxe class figures I've handled. Better than Gears? Probably not. I'd still say the Gears has him beat. But then again, Gears doesn't have this figure's feet. This has some of the most mobile feet I've seen on any figure. Like, they can tilt up really far, they can tilt down really far, they have a really good inwards bend. Really, any pose you'd want to get this guy in, you'd probably wouldn't have any problems getting him in it. So yeah, overall, this is definitely in my top 10 favorite figures, and even though it got something of a re-release in 2022, I am happy that it did get, a full, not store exclusive re-release after a good long while. So then we get to Armada Wheeljack, which yet another figure that I'm finally getting to talk about, despite, it being a very well-known one. Armada Wheeljack, I'm actually going to put at the bottom of B tier. It's pretty much the basic great Transformers figure. Posing is actually below average for this version of the Siege Sideswipe mold. It was pretty much average for just the Siege one, but with the Kingdom Earth mode and then the Siege, then the Armada Wheeljack version of the mold, both of them, the retooling for the shins on both of them resulted in less than 90 degrees of bend at the knee. So unfortunately, his posing went from average to below average. Aside from that, though, I think the robot mode still captures the look of Armada Wheeljack very well. Honestly, this mold has actually done a really good job at capturing whatever character it's trying to be, despite it very clearly being a sideswipe mold from the get-go. Like, despite it being obviously meant for sideswipe, this still does a fantastic job at capturing all the characters that it's been repainted into in both modes. And this has one of the all-time great simple but fun transformations. So, it's not really doing anything special outside of probably having the best QC out of all of the versions of this mold that I had. But it's still great enough to make its way into B tier. Then we have Voyager Ramjet, who I'm actually going to put at the top of D tier. I'll be honest, I don't really feel anything for the Earthrise Seeker mold in general. Like, if they do re-release Thundercracker and Skywarp, I will buy them because they're Thundercracker and Skywarp. But honestly, this mold is just kind of boring to me. Outside the jet mode, the jet mode is great, but robot mode doesn't really do a lot for me. Posing is pretty average. Transformation is mostly average, except it's more unsatisfying with the cone heads because you're not able to close the doors for the legs all the way. And I still don't understand why they put the wings on the legs instead of just making the wings one solid piece. Like, it's better here since you can fold it along the legs, but with Dirge, you just had a giant wing flap sticking off his leg, and it just looked awkward. So yeah, I'm happy people have another chance at getting this, but it doesn't really do a lot for me, and I won't be picking it up. So then we have Overcharge, the most non-character of non-characters in this entire line. Where the hell did the scroll bar go on this thing? I swear there was a scroll bar somewhere here, but I don't know where it went. Yeah, anyways, this is the most non-character of non-characters, but it is the Legacy Blitzwing mold, so I will go ahead and throw it in B tier because I am a big fan of that mold. Like, in general, the colors are fine. I really like the blue head, but otherwise the colors aren't really doing much for me, so I'd say I probably like this less than Blitzwing. Still has the same fun transformation, still has the same above average posing. Tank mode is still great if you can, get behind the tank deck. And the jet mode is complicated for me. It's like, I can get behind it on some days, and then on other days, it's just, way too chunky for my taste. 50-50. It's like, I've come to terms with it, but it's still not great. So, great mold, nice colors, not a character at all. And finally, we have the figure that I was the most excited for with Wave 5, and that's Galaxy Shuttle, because I never handled the Siege Astrotrain mold. I've seen it several times, but I never really bothered to get it. And then I found at a convention where the guy wanted $90 for it. No. Look, all things considered, this is an A tier figure, but it's not $90 A tier. There are some problems with this. Like, some of the tolerances are a little bit too tight, and yeah, some of the tolerances are too tight, and some parts of it are a bit too sharp. But otherwise, I think that the Siege Astrotrain mold works really well for the character of Galaxy Shuttle. Even if, even if like the Autobot symbol got moved from the chest to being split in half the legs, that's just because with that detail, they're being more accurate to the shuttle mode than they are the robot mode. Robot mode still fits really well. And in general, robot mode still fits really well with this mold for this character. Posing is great. Aside from the knees, everything else is pretty much above average. Here's the interesting thing. This is probably the most simple triple changer that I've handled, and yet it still manages to be really fun. Transformation into shuttle mode is pretty fun outside of, some parts being a bit too sharp and some parts being a bit too tight, especially the boosters in the back. But shuttle mode looks fantastic, and it's probably the only mode to be compromised, despite the compromises being very small. It's literally just it having some hollowness in the sort of upper, sort of where the tail fin is. And then the transformation to train mode is also really fun, and the train mode is a solid log of black that still looks really nice. That's still a really nice train mode. I know this character didn't turn into a train, but it's the Astro Train mold, so of course it was going to get shafted with it. It was going to get stuck with the train mode. So yeah, overall, the wait. I waited 2 years to get this figure in my collection, and the wait was worth it. In fact, it was so worth it that I am very excited now for the Triple Takeover 3-pack to come on pre-order so I can finally have an Astro Train in my collection. Yeah, overall great figure. If you were looking for him when he first came out, I think you'll be more than happy to get him now that he's on store shelves again. So yeah, let's go ahead and delete this row, and that is our completed tier list. I think I'm pretty happy with this overall. Some stuff might change later, but in general, I'm very satisfied with this. I will say one reason that I split, the excellent figures into S and A tier is because I didn't want, all of this to be in one single tier. So I think splitting up into this was the right choice. So yeah, in general, when it comes to Legacy United, this was probably the best chapter of Legacy so far. Each chapter got better as it went along, but this was definitely the best one. This had the largest swath of fantastic figures, and even then, its worst figures are, still fine. Like, I'd still say that all of these are on the better end of okay, whereas Breakdown is on the lower end. And I guess if anyone is wondering where these guys would be, let me think about that. Tarn would be here. Laser Prime would be probably here. Strong Arm would be here without question. Cosmos would be there. And then Lockdown would probably be about... probably still... Okay, I'm sorry about that. There was just a giant glitch on my screen. But yeah, I'd probably still leave him as our own honorable mention, but he'd be in B tier. So yeah, that's the fully completed tier list. Still very happy with it. Anyways, guys, that's going to be it for my ranking tier list of Legacy United. If you enjoyed, feel free to leave a like and subscribe for more fun content. See you guys in the next video. Take care, and Godspeed.